Hey everyone, this is Kevin, your entrepreneur, and I hope you enjoyed my two non-Uber stories because it turns out Uber just dragged me right back into talking about them yet again, even on the day when we were finally going to start at least experimenting with branching out. This happens. This one made me mad. Not gonna lie. This one made me mad. But according to Gizmondo, a headline says, in letter, Uber said drivers didn't make enough advertising earnings due to their choices. I bet you can figure out where this is going, can you? In January, Uber settled claims by the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, that it misled drivers about how much money they could make on the platform. And for those of you who don't know what that is, you see those ads that say, oh, you can make $35 an hour driving for Uber. And, most of us who have done this for any amount of time know that that's kind of not really true. But in the letter taken by Gizmondo under the Freedom of Information Act, Uber argued that drivers were fundamentally at fault for earning less than the advertised rates because they were choosing not to drive enough. I'm sure, sorry, my nose itched right there. The FTC accused Uber of making, quote, false, misleading, or unsubstantiated claims regarding driver earnings on its website and in ads on Craigslist. The company had claimed, for example, that drivers in New York earned a median of $90,000 annually, that drivers in San Francisco earned a median of $74,000 per year, which, by the way, $74,000 and $90,000 in those respective countries, not enough to live comfortably there. The FTC investigation found that less than 10% of drivers in those cities earned the advertised rates according to the agency's complaint. In fact, New York drivers' earnings were closer to $61,000. San Francisco drivers' earnings were closer to $53,000, the FTC found. The FTC also alleged that Uber was misleading about the financing options it could offer drivers. Uber ended up paying $20 million to the FTC to settle the matter, and the FTC said it would refund some of that money to the drivers. I wonder what some of that money actually means. But here's the thing. Here's where it starts getting really upsetting. In the defensive letter sent November 7th, 2016, about 2 months before the settlement was announced, the company's lawyers disputed the FTC's allegations by claiming that it was absolutely possible for drivers to make the advertised sums and that drivers who made less did so by choice. Uber requested that the letter be kept confidential. Of course they did. And it offers an inside look at the company's perspectives. According to labor activists, the letter reveals Uber's dismal views of its drivers, although, honestly, I didn't need this letter to know that they have a very, very poor view of the drivers. Quote, on reflection, we trust that you will agree that no enforcement action is warranted, wrote Andrew Smith and John Grobert. I know I pronounced that wrong. Attorneys at Covington and Burling who represented Uber during the FTC inquiry. We see no basis for the central allegations that potential drivers were misled by earning claims into taking on auto leases or purchases that were more expensive than originally advertised by Uber. Okay, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop for a second. There's more of this I want to comment on, but I'm gonna comment on that particular aspect because what they are referring to is the car leasing programs that Uber provided, where people would lease the car or buy the car through Uber, and they would pay it off by driving for Uber. And here's the thing. When they did so, they said, this is how much you need to make a week to make the payments. And I thought about this for a little while and then ultimately didn't, and I'm glad I didn't. But here's the thing. People signed up for those leases. And let's say and it takes a few years to pay off a car. I don't care how. Well, okay, I guess it does matter if you make a lot of money, but you're not making that money here. And what they did was they would be making the payments on the car, and they would be doing well because hey, you know what? This is what we budgeted for. This is what we think we can make, and we can do it. And then one winter, the rates are cut 30%. All of a sudden, 30%. Now, they can still make those payments, but here's the thing. They were making the payments while they were making $2.20 a mile. Now, they're making $1.90 a mile. So it's less, but it's still possible. You just got to drive a little more is all. Then, one winter, the rates drop another 30%. Now they're making like $1.60 a mile. It's still possible, but they're being stretched. They're being stretched real thin at this point, especially since the gas prices, which were $2 the year before, are now $250. So it's costing more to drive. But hey, you rev up the driving, you drive more because you got to make those payments. Now the person is making 50 cents a mile or 70 cents a mile. Before you know it, the car payment never went down. It never went down. The driver just made less money unless they work more hours, which even if they work more hours, there is a big difference between $2.20 and 70 cents a mile. A huge, huge difference. And that is what they're referring to right here. Sorry. And it's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting because, yeah, no, that is not the driver's fault. The driver perfectly budgeted that money. But this is the equivalent of someone going to a job. They get a job at, let's say they get a job at Amazon, just for the heck of it. And they said, hey, we're going to make $20 an hour. Well, hey, they do the math. This is how much we're working. This is how much we'll make. This is how much we earn. So when it comes to living arrangements, we can afford this apartment or house and this food budget. And then one day they find out their pay has been cut to $17 an hour. Then one day they find out it's been cut to $15 an hour. It goes all the way down to $9 an hour. And that, whatever that apartment they agreed to rent or that house they decided to buy, it's not getting cheaper. It's probably getting more expensive, to be honest. But you're making less money. How is that in any way the employee's fault? Let's move on, because, yeah, I definitely hate that one. They later argued that since Uber drivers are independent contractors rather than employees, the company couldn't be held responsible for their earnings. Partly true, but let's continue. If drivers weren't earning the rates Uber had advertised, it was because the drivers weren't working enough, not because Uber had misrepresented their earnings potential. But the thing is, they did misrepresent, because when we started, we were making this much money. Now we're making this much money. And there's a huge gap there. There's a huge gap that the drivers did not budget for. And the thing is, they have argued whenever they cut the rates that you would get more rides, thus you would make more money, which has never been true. That's just basic math, not done right. But here's the thing. When the rates went down, you did get more rides. But there was a point when, honestly, you couldn't get any more rides if you tried. And yet the rates kept dropping. So not only can you not get more rides than you already are making, but now you're making less money. So now it doesn't even matter that you're driving extra. You're still making less money. Quote, it bears emphasis that keeping prices low for riders requires a steady supply of drivers to meet. It's all about the riders. It's always all about the riders. Yet prohibiting Uber from advertising earnings that drivers can realistically expect to achieve simply because those earnings exceed the earnings of drivers whose choices cause them to earn less handicaps Uber in maintaining that supply. Well, did the drivers choose to have their rates cut? I know they're going to say, oh, well, they agreed to the user agreement, but they did not want their rates cut. They did not want their rates cut. Here's the thing. Had the rates stayed the same this whole time, this would be a good argument. But it's not, because Uber is constantly manipulating the game. It's manipulating how much you earn. It's manipulating how much you take home. It's manipulating how you get your rides. Heck, there's even going to be manipulating how the surge works. What about Uber Pool? Uber Pool did not exist back then. And again, it's a discounted rates, and in cities where it launches, everyone wants to use Uber Pool. And drivers are kind of stuck with making less money or not accepting those rides at all and potentially not making any money, because I've been to areas where Uber Pool is present. It's annoying. Do you know how many rides I pass up because I refuse to take Uber Pool? I turn away surge rides on Uber Pool because it's not worth it. And I know that even if I took them, I'm getting a discounted rate. And They said that they raised the earnings for Uber Pool. They didn't. They raised it 80 cents a pickup. It's okay. It's dawning on me. This could be a long one. I'm sorry for not warning you about that up front. Let's see here. Let's see here. And what on the other side, the FTC said what's really interesting is that the claim Uber usually makes is that they're independent contractors because they can be flexible. Here, Uber's claim is that they are free to earn whatever they can. The only thing that separates a driver is the level of laziness. When drivers face the consequences of the business model, they say it's because the drivers are lazy or have wrong expectations. Well, and there's like the expectations thing. That's where the FTC's complaint about the earnings came in, because people said, oh, you can make this much money, and people start doing the math and it's like, no, that's really hard to make that kind of money, especially since Uber actually factors in the way that they came up with the ratings is they kind of said, what's the average you will make on the base fare if you just drove non-stop? And then they put that in the ads, not saying that you basically can't sleep if you want to make those rates under the base fare. Now, of course, you have surge and stuff, so some people make those rates because they're really good at that and the bonuses. But yeah, the expectations were totally stacked against the drivers from the beginning. Smith and Grobu argued that Uber shouldn't face any financial penalties for misleading drivers because they hadn't misled drivers at all. Quote, it would make no sense to give additional compensation to those drivers who earned less, as there are a myriad reasons, and in italics, all within the control of the driver, why that may be the case. Many drivers intentionally limit their hours and acceptance of trips for personal reasons, and a further payment would be entirely a windfall. Uber is right that some drivers choose not to rely on the app for full-time work. The company advertises flexibility as one of the perks it offers drivers, and many drivers choose to work part-time with Uber for supplemental income. About 60% of Uber drivers work fewer than 10 hours per week, according to Uber, which it should be stated that before the price cuts took effect, that number was closer to 20% or less did it part-time. Most people actually were doing it full-time because they could make way more money driving for Uber than they could working most jobs. Although those days are long gone, I think. In cities with higher costs and more stringent regulations, drivers tend to work more. In New York City, for instance, 64% of drivers work more than 15 hours per week. Recent data released in the UK indicates that nearly a third of all drivers there are logged into Uber for more than 40 hours a week. And that's interesting because Uber's been fighting the regulations from the government, and one of the claims that they make is that it would hinder people who want to drive. But yet they claim they want more consistent drivers, and it seems like people who are actually forced to be regulated and pay for licensing fees and stuff tend to drive more because their own money is in this, so they're going to do it. Just a thought. Desai objected to the idea that compensation from the FTC investigation would be considered a windfall. Quote, if Uber was required to compensate drivers who earned less than promised, the idea that Uber would call that compensation a windfall, that's just outrageous. There are people who work long shifts and long weeks with the expectation of pay the company has promised them. Yeah, but you do realize, Uber, that the FTC is basically talking about minimum wage here. That's what they're saying. They're saying that if they work an hour, they should get the minimum wage, which I have worked hours before where I have not made minimum wage through a combination of just getting nothing but short trips, or maybe getting that rider who wants to go through In-N-Out Burger, and then you get stuck there for 30 minutes, and then you don't get another ride. You know, that's what they're talking about. Like, why is it that you can't charge a rate where for one trip the hour, you will get the minimum wage? And if you do more than one trip, guess what? Then you're doing good. That encourages people to work harder. I didn't want to just read this whole article, but there's just so much stupid here. In its complaint, the FTC objected that Uber claimed to offer the best financing options available for drivers who wanted to buy or lease a vehicle through the company's Vehicle Solutions program. We're getting to that finally. Uber didn't directly manage the program at the time and connected drivers to third-party lenders. The FTC argued that since Uber didn't control the rates and they were often subprime, the company shouldn't claim they were the best available. The rates were in fact bad, and the FTC found them to be worse than average for the industry. That was kind of the main reason I didn't do a new vehicle through Uber. And of course, now I'm glad I didn't, because once Uber dropped the rates and I would have still been on the hook for that payment, I would have been, as Uberman once stated, Uber pissed. But in their letter, Smith and Grobert said that Uber couldn't be held accountable for using the word best in its marketing materials. Why not? Leaving aside the descriptors such as best are non-actionable puffery, Uber was justified in concluding that these were the best financing options available to the poor credit or no credit borrowers targeted by this ad. But Uber still made that call. Uber still made the call that they were under the belief this was the best. They called it the best. Thus, that's their personal opinion, and that's what they advertised, and that's one of the reasons they were getting sued by the FTC was for poor advertising. So that actually works against their argument. Again, Uber offloaded the blame onto its drivers. Of course. You know what? I still got to make the video, obviously. But one of the things that Aaron said in the Uberman interview was that from 180 days it changed, he believed that drivers were taken away from that initiative, that Uber cares more about the drivers, they want to do better by the drivers, and that the drivers can have faith that the company has their best interest at heart. Really. Because it seems like Uber, the company, thinks the drivers are lazy and stupid, and if they're not making money, it's not Uber's fault for dropping the rates and, giving them long distances and giving people options to wait long periods of time when they know that waiting around doesn't pay money. No, it's a driver's fault. It's always a driver's fault. Oh yeah, it's also not because Uber Pool is just like a money guzzler from the drivers. Discrepancy between advertised leasing rates and actual payments were due to drivers selecting more expensive cars or upgrades while not increasing their down payment. Again, you dropped the rates on them. They budgeted for those cars, and then they couldn't pay them because they essentially got their pay cut in half, if not more. Vehicle brought some of its vehicle leasing programs in-house after problems with third-party lenders, but the program was ultimately deemed unsustainable and is being shut down, which, again, what makes Uber think that their self-driving cars is going to save the future? They can't even afford to lease these cars out to people. They're going to run them themselves, and they never stop. Give me a break. Even though the company ultimately sold for $20 million, Uber argued that the FTC had no reasonable formula for assessing damages. The agency had, quote, identified no specific circumstance in which any individual has incurred specific demonstrable injury. Uber's legal team argued, knowing that the FTC had not imposed financial penalties in other auto financing cases. Please tell me the rates get brought up at some point. The FTC countered that drivers who attempted to cancel vehicle lease agreements after not receiving the earnings promised by Uber suffered significant monetary harm. What significant monetary harm? I would love to know what that means. I know it has to do with the rates, or maybe even there's like a penalty fee. Just something. Give me something to work with here, FTC. I'm on your side, and now even I'm starting to side with Uber. You need to make your case a little better. Uber's $20 million settlement was approved by the FTC in a 2-1 vote. FTC Commissioner Maureen K. Olhassen agreed with Uber's lawyers in her dissenting, writing that the settlement wasn't tied to actual financial harm. suing Uber was, what is this case about if it's not about financial harm? After the settlement was announced in January, Uber launched a 180 Days of Change initiative aimed at making amends to drivers. As part of that effort, Uber added tipping options to its app for the first time. Uber now has a policy of advertising median earnings and including disclosures that explain how it arrived at the advertised amount. Here we go. Finally, the rates. Although arguments in the letter may seem somewhat harsh on drivers, the claims made in the document aren't entirely out of character for the company. In a video published by Bloomberg in February, then CEO Travis Kalanick bickered with a driver who complained that rates had decreased, essentially arguing that the driver needed to work harder. "I lost $97,000 because of you," the driver in the video told Kalanick. "I'm bankrupt because of you. Yes, 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 you keep changing every day. You keep changing every day." And then Kalanick famously responded, "Some people don't like to take responsibility for their own. They blame everything in their life on somebody else. Good luck." It's amazing how much damage that video caused, and I laughed for probably a good 3 minutes when I first commented on that video, and I'm still laughing today. Desai said Uber's attitude towards drivers was upsetting. Quote, "Any Uber driver that reads it would feel really betrayed by the company. That is how they're talking behind their backs." And you can see the letter there. So 22 minutes. Wow. It should be noted that this letter was sent in January when Kalanick was still the CEO and Derek Hay was not. And it should be noted the 180 Days of Change was pretty much probably made as a direct result of this for the most part. But the arrogance of the company. And here's one of the problems. The drivers are so essential to Uber on both ends. Uber relies on the drivers for their product to work, and they treat them horribly. Prosecutors go after Uber, claiming that they're treating the drivers poorly, and yet they don't seem to be consulting any drivers about what it is actually like. They don't have anyone who actually drives for Uber helping spearhead these lawsuits. And this settlement was made in January. Did anybody get any money from the FTC from this? Did anyone get a penny? I would love to know. Please comment. I need to know. Did the FTC actually follow through with any plans to protect the drivers? Did they? I'm under the impression they didn't. I am under the impression that they pocketed the money and they left. And you know what? Uber's comments, as arrogant as they are, as easily provably false as they are, the FTC can't come back with a single response. You cut the rates. You cut the rates. Heck, you deactivate drivers because of complaints passengers make. And do you have any investigation, any whatsoever, to prove that the passenger's claim is real? Do you? I bet you not. I bet you not. And the FTC had power to really hurt them, and they didn't, because they just didn't know what they were doing. They didn't know what they were doing. I sense they still don't know what they're doing. So, even though that should, in a sense, be old news, it makes me upset nonetheless. It makes me upset nonetheless. And boy, there's probably going to be like a little meet and greet tonight with some people who follows. And this is the video that's going to go up the day before we have it. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. But now, for those of you who are not going to be there, what do you think? Do you agree with Uber? Do you agree with the FTC? Are you frustrated? Well, I would love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And if you enjoy the videos I make, consider becoming a Patreon member for a little $1 a month. And as always, Flame responsibly. Have a good one.